Hi, Kevin Tharp here. What we're going to be talking today about is the visual content elements, and that's those things that appear on the page when you turn off all the styles. So what I'm going to do here is I've got Firefox here, and I've got a tool called Web Developer Toolbar installed here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to disable all the styles. So that's going to turn off all the presentation rules, and this is what Facebook looks like when you turn off all the styles. But guess what? That is the content elements that are part of Facebook. And so those are the things that show up. And what we're specifically going to be talking about is those things that are not text, because text is sort of its own character, and we'll hit on that before, and we'll hit it on it again. So we're not going to be covering that. We're going to be looking at the visual elements. So I'm going to do it again for this page. These are the elements in the page that are the visual elements. And in this page, the only image that shows up there is this this bird. So we're going to move on to this next rule. This is the horizontal rule. So if I again turn off all the styles, what you'll see is that there is the bird still, but I've gone in and I've added a horizontal rule. Horizontal rule just means a line that goes across the page, and it is the most basic of the visual content elements, and there's not a whole lot that you can do with it. It used to be strictly a presentational item. It was non-semantic. All it meant is that here's a visual break. Now that HTML5 has changed that, it's made it a semantic rule, and now it represents a thematic break within the page. So your search engines and such now recognize that when there's a horizontal rule, there's a change in the theme within the page, or at least that's the proper way to do this. So with your horizontal rule, you can apply other properties to it. So this is a basic horizontal rule up here, but what I've done down here is I've started manipulating that. And the reason I can manipulate that is because it is now able to take on some of the properties of other HTML elements. And so what I've done in this particular case to demonstrate that is I've got a horizontal rule, but what I've done is I've given it an ID of formatted HR. And to that, in the head section, so that it only applies to this page, I've done an embedded styles. And what I've done is I've given that ID of formatted HR, I've given it a font weight of bold, which really doesn't do anything in this case. I've given it a background color of red, pound F00, and then I gave it a width of 75%. You notice it only goes part of the way across the page. I've given it a height of 10 pixels, so comparing it to that, this is what it would be if I hadn't styled it. This is what it is now that I have styled it, so that it's only covering 75% of the page. Given it that height of 10 pixels, and then what I've done in order to center it, and this is a trick you're going to need to know, I have given it a margin right auto and a margin left auto in order for that to work, and that's what it did, is it put the margins on either side. So I've got a width of 75%, and that's got to be explained anytime you're trying to center an element in the page. And then I've given it margin right and margin left. So it went to 75%, split that 25%, so you've got 12.5% on each side, and that is the rule that has applied. I could go in there and I could give it a border. I could do any number of things to affect this, but it is a horizontal rule, and it is the most basic of visual elements on the that you can put onto the page. The next thing is the image element. Now, the image element is one of the most powerful tools that we have. The thing that makes the web exciting is the ability for it to be a visual medium for many of us. And so the ability to add images, and I can actually remember using the internet when images weren't a part of the primary content. And you could go and find images, but they weren't included as part of the normal interface that you were working with. and that makes it a lot more interesting to use. And so there's some things that you need to look at. The resolution, normally when you are working with images on the web, you want to have them as a resolution of 72 dpi. That is the web standard, and everything is a rule, it's not a law. You could do it differently, but it's going to display higher. It's going to be a larger file size than if you do it with that optimized, changing it down to 72 dpi. So what I've done is I've opened up a image here in Photoshop, which is a software provided by Adobe that allows you to manipulate images. And this is a very large image, and what I want to do is I want to take a look at some of those properties so that you can understand what I'm looking at here. So I'm just going to go into image size, and whatever software you have should have the ability, image manipulation software should give you the ability to do this, but you'll notice that I've got at 300 pixels to an inch down here. Now that is way too big for the web, and so what you're looking at on your screen right now is nothing close to what the size of the image is actually going to be. So what you want to do is you want to change that to 72 dots per inch, and this is what happens. It changes it to a much smaller size because instead of having those 300 dots in one given inch, you've only got 72 dots into that inch. So it appears as a smaller image, and it ends up being a smaller size image as far as the number of bits that come through. Now in Photoshop you can do a save for web, and that's going to give you the opportunity to optimize that image for the web. And when you're saving for the web, there's only a couple of options there. You can do GIF, JPEG, PNG8 or PNG24. WBMP is an emerging web standard. It's not highly accessible to all the browsers yet, so I wouldn't use that one yet. But PNG8 is the one that it wanted to default to, and so we're going to go with that. And what that does is it takes advantage of the different properties of both the JPEGs, which are generally better for displaying photographs, and the GIFs, which are normally better for doing graphics. And you'll notice that in this case it creates a color palette that is fairly simple because there aren't a lot of images in this. And so in this case it's going to allow me to make a pretty small image out of this. And you can tell by looking over here that in this case it's 159.1K. Now if I had not changed that and I had saved the same image, then the size over here would have been 6.64 meg. So just a huge image compared to dropping it down and optimizing it. And that's one of the things that you want to do, is make sure that you are optimizing your images to use on the web before you upload them. The other thing that is important is to set it to the size that you're going to have on your page. So you'll often have a good idea of how big you want it to be in the page, rather than having a huge image and then resizing it down so that it displays at a certain size in your page. You want to actually change that. And for instance, you'll see that this image is 640 by 233. I could display a much larger image at 640 by 233, but it's kind of like, let's say I had a gallon of water and I only wanted to drink a cup of that water. I would want to actually pour that water so that I had a cup of it, rather than just looking at that gallon of water as if it were a cup. You still have to download that whole gallon of water to drink, even if you only wanted a cup. And I realize that's a really bad analogy, but just resizing the way that an image is displayed in the page doesn't reduce the number of pixels or bits that have to be downloaded from the web. So you want to change the size of that image so that it is the size that you want people to download, especially if you're dealing with mobile, because the people pay more for the data when they're coming through mobile, and it's slower, and you want to make your pages as quick to download as possible. It also affects your search engine optimization when you have really slow pages. So you're going to want to resize those images so that they're the proper size. And we've already talked about the format, either JPEG, GIF, or PNG. And those depend upon what you're wanting to do. Now, the different elements, the IMG is the element for an image, and the properties of that are SRC, which is source, which gives it the pathway to that file. You've got the width and the height. The width and the height can be provided in percentage, pixels, or EMs. In this case, it's provided in pixels. Then you're going to want to have an alt tag. An alt tag is an alternate description of that image for people who cannot see that image. And that is not just good design, but if you're doing any kind of sites that need to be accessible, that's a required element, that alt tag, so that people who are blind or for whatever reason can't see the images will still know what the content of that were. So those are the elements that are considered part of the content, the image and the horizontal rule. Those are really the main elements that are visual content elements. Now the next video that we'll look at is looking at the visual presentation, and that's all of the things that are up there when you have your styles on, and we'll look at those in the next video.